Hi, I'm John Dinkel, and this is the Growth and Business podcast for Citybiz, where we talk with local and national leaders in sales, marketing, and business development to learn more about new and tested strategies to grow your business. I'm here today with Quinn, principal at Quinn Strategy Group, and Margaret Wilson, founder and principal at Tandem Partners. So welcome, Ann. Welcome, Margaret. Appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
Thanks, John.
So I thought we'd start the conversation by taking just a couple of minutes to tell us about Quinn Strategy Group and Tandem Partners. And while you're at it, would you both mind telling us what your role there is and a little brief background? And Ann, I'll start with you first.
Sure. Thanks, John. So I own a strategic advisory firm called Quinn Strategy Group, and we work with our clients on all types of strategy. What that involves is we help them get an understanding of where they are currently, help them get clarity around their strategy, their growth, where they want to go, and then we help them put a roadmap in place to get there. We work with corporate clients, nonprofits, and private foundations.
Great. Thank you. And Margaret?
Yeah, John, my company's Tandem Partners, and we are organizational consultants and leadership coaches. And we work with companies and leaders and teams that are in transition. And sometimes those transitions might be, for example, a multi-generational family and business in a generational transition. Sometimes it is a business in transition experiencing significant growth or kind of being at an inflection point in their growth. Sometimes it's working with individual leaders who are kind of stepping into or out of a leadership role.
Excellent. I appreciate that. And thanks again for both of you for being here. So as you know, we want to talk about growth today. So I'd like to start off by asking each of you, in your opinion and given your roles as business advisors, what should companies be thinking about when it comes to growth? And Margaret, I'll let you take this one first.
Sure. Well, of course, we're all thinking a lot about growth over the last couple of years. How do we do it? What is the particular kind of growth that's available to us that are opportunities right now? And I think right now in 2022, maybe it might be a case of what got us here isn't necessarily what's going to get us there. And, I've always admired in my business career, I've always admired leaders and entrepreneurs who are, they really have a handle on the market and they just understand niches and they kind of understand what's going to be hot and what consumers want, and they're ahead of the curve. I think right now, though, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's kind of hard to lead from that perspective of being able to see what really is going to take a hold in the market. And so one way that we have of thinking about growth is that, it really is about kind of building a stronger house. If we look at what's happened with companies who really have excelled over the last 2 years, when there was like the shock and awe in 2020, where we had we had to reconcile ourselves to this pandemic. And then we had sort of last summer, it was the great resignation of people leaving. Right now we're in sort of I call it the great reshuffle, where people are coming and going. We're kind of looking at our strategy. So there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of uncertainty. So I think the particular kind of growth maybe that we want to look at is the growth in ourselves. Like if we're going to be running a marathon, I could say, I'm not a runner, Anne's an incredible runner. I could say to myself, I definitely want to run that marathon. I should get out there and run. But of course, I can only run as fast or as far as my legs are strong or as my lungs are strong. So I think this is that kind of time where we need to prepare ourselves for the uncertainty and the volatility. And maybe that's a way to look at growth right now.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And what do you think about that what should companies be thinking about when it comes to growth?
Yeah. So what I tell my clients is you've learned a lot about growth over the last couple of years, whether you've been forced to change or you've innovated to kind of rise to the challenge of the last couple of years. You're in a new place and there's a great opportunity to build on that, right? So whether or not you've identified new customers, new ways of delivering your product or service, many organizations have found new partners, new funding sources. So now's really a great time to pause kind of think about all of those pieces, put those pieces together, and to support their growth and move forward.
Yeah, I like what you had to say. There about a year ago, I went to this panel discussion, and it was a panel discussion of business development people, and they said there were three things that this pandemic had brought. And Margaret, going back to kind of what you said, and got what you said too, that there were three things that companies should look at, like the market, the connections, and their tactics, because things have just changed, right, so much, and so that follows exactly what both of you are saying. So I like that a lot. That's pretty interesting.
I was going to say, sometimes I was just thinking of a company that I've just started working with recently. Oftentimes we think about capacity or, this time as being a time where like, oh, we have to really get in front of this so that we can grow. But there's also what's happening now is we have some companies who've grown a lot over the last 2 years. I have a company I'm working with that they're kind of hooked into real estate and construction in a sense, into the home market. And this company has had explosive growth, and they weren't even really prepared for the growth. So what they're doing now is they have to actually kind of take a step back, because it's like the house is ready to cave in, right? There's like too much snow on the roof, and the pillars aren't strong enough to hold the explosive growth that they have had. So it can kind of work both ways.
Yeah, true. In your experience, what two things are companies doing to inhibit growth right now?
So I think kind of two things that I sometimes see. One is they pursue their growth strategy with almost blinders on, right? They ignore new information because they're pursuing this growth. And if you think about it, if you're driving a car, you're looking out the windshield, you have your eyes on the horizon, you know where you're going. But that doesn't stop you from looking in the rearview mirror to see what did you just pass, what might be coming up behind you, side mirrors, checking those to kind of figure out your position vis-a-vis other things in the environment. You're checking your dashboard. Do I have enough gas, oil? What's my speed? Your eyes are constantly kind of shifting around. And so oftentimes I see companies are like, this is where we're going, and they put the blinders on, and it really inhibits the growth because they get blindsided along the way. And the other thing I often see is companies do a great job kind of figuring out what that growth goal is, but they don't address any of the problems that exist that are going to get in the way. So they may rely on clunky systems, or they have really strong operational inefficiencies that they don't address. Or maybe they have toxic managers that they don't address. And so as they're, trying to move forward, they're really spending a lot of time trying to overcome these distractions and obstacles rather than just addressing and fixing and moving on. And so that can really hinder progress as you're trying to move forward and grow.
Yeah, that's good. Margaret, do you have any comment there?
Yeah, I think that, sticking with Ann's car metaphor here, one thing that we're really engaging our clients in conversation around is like, let's think about you're driving down the road and you want to drive faster, but anything that's making your drive bumpy, like if your communication isn't crisp, if people don't have clear direction, if you've got workarounds for everything because you have inefficient processes, it just bogs you down. And so, companies' growth and speed are very connected. And so anything that's bogging you down, slowing you down, making you work harder than you should have to, right? All of those things are important to take care of now to prepare us for the next surge, I think.
Yeah, that's great. But thank you. And this next question is a really important one, I think. 'Cause I'm all about strategy and implementation, but how do companies figure out the best growth strategies and then implement them? In my business and in my experience, the plan, I mean, there's enough smart people in the world and most companies that come up with a plan and a strategy. It's the implementation process that, kind of keeps them from achieving the plan goals. So in your opinion, how do companies figure that out? How do they figure out the best growth strategies and then how do they figure out how to implement them? Margaret, would you? Yeah, any one of you take it on.
I'll start us off. Thanks. So, kind of one thought, and I love to hear, I love strategy and implementation. John, I don't often hear people say that. And so it's good to be in a room with like-minded people. I think, starting this strategy and growth strategy based in an assessment is really important. So really looking internally, where do you have momentum? Where are you strong? Where do you have gaps? How do you overcome them? And then looking externally as well. What are consumer trends or economic or political trends or regulatory things that might impact your ability to reach those goals? And being very honest about it, tackling that elephant in the room if you have one. So basing your strategy in reality is very, very important. Then when you switch to implementation, I've found, especially over the last couple of years, breaking down your strategy into kind of short bursts, really doing short bursts of planning is very helpful for couple of reasons. It can be very hard to figure out what your goal should be in 12 or 18 months, but most people have a pretty good line of sight for 6 months at a time. And so setting those goals really helps kind of focus the team. They feel a sense of accomplishment. And let's face it, everyone's team is pretty burned out. Maybe you have a lot of vacancies, or you have people who haven't worked together in a long time, so they don't have kind of that muscle memory of working well as a well-oiled machine. So kind of doing that implementation and in short bursts really helps. And then my other thought on that is a couple of years ago, maybe you could get away with setting a strategy and then adding capacity on the fly to realize it. And you just can't do that anymore. And your employees are just one example of that, right? Where you may not have enough employees, may not have enough staff. Maybe you're trying to add capability. So really looking at your capacity once you've set your goal, your growth goal, and thinking about how's our management match up with this? How about our financial, both our business model and our financial assets that we have? How are our processes and systems aligned to support this? And making sure that there's a match there. Because if your growth strategy relies on things, capacity that you don't have or can't afford to add or can't add on that timeline, you won't be able to be successful, and it'll really hinder your implementation.
Yeah, that's great. Margaret, what would you add to that?
Well, I would just add to that, you're aware, John, that Ann and I frequently team up on engagements where we need to have an eye on strategy and we need to have an eye on people. And right now, those two things are very inextricably linked, even more so than they have been in the past. I know that everyone's concerned about what's happening out there in the marketplace for employees. Companies are fearful of losing people. I always say, like, no good thing ever came from fear, right? We need to aspire in our leadership. We need to aspire to what we do want. But so thinking about strategy and people, those two things, they need to be wound together. They really do. And I would even go so far as to say right now, really, people are the strategy for a lot of businesses.
So how should companies be engaging their teams to ensure that growth does happen?
Yeah. I think that word engage or engagement, I'm not sure that it's really well understood by business leaders. I would say one of the first things to do is really understand what that means, because engaging people is not the same thing as communicating. Engaging is not the same thing as telling, like, well, here's where we're going, everybody, and now that's our engagement strategy. It's also not putting a Band-Aid on things like burnout after it's already occurred. I think that we need to be engaging people in the strategy of our business. We need to involve them in helping to come up with the strategy. Very much upstream, not just telling people after we've done all the thinking and then engaging them sort of after the fact. I think also it's very interesting just to think about, there's a really big disconnect between how employees think about engagement and what they really want from their employers and what employers think employees want. And I remember Ann and I were looking at a piece that actually, I think, did it come out from McKinsey, Ann? a while back, maybe it was the end of last year, we were looking at a really interesting study that asked, I think there might have been a set of things, and employers said, well, these are the things employees want, and employees said, these are the things that we want. What was so striking was looking at the scatter plot graph, and they were in opposite parts of the graph, what people want and what employers think employees want. And the biggest difference is that a lot of employers focus on transactional things like compensation and benefits and perks and calling things work-life balance. And what employees really want, all of those things are important in the absence of what employees really want, which is engagement and connection and relationship. It's relational, it's not transactional. So we have to think about engagement in terms of connection and really connecting people into the strategy that we're pursuing, the direction we're taking, and really the mission that we're trying to fulfill. Every organization needs a mission, whether you're a nonprofit, for-profit, et cetera.
And it's particularly critical now with this, new hybrid workforce. How do you then engage your teams? And if only half the people or none of the people are coming to the office, and you've got communication issues there, obviously collaboration, innovation. It is definitely a challenge for companies to really truly engage your teams. I mean, back when I was at the BBJ, right what you said, Margaret, I loved getting everybody's input on a big decision or strategy that we were going to be launching, because we had their buy-in. Even if we didn't use their ideas, they knew they were heard. And in most cases, actually, some of the best ideas did come from them anyway. So so I totally agree with you there.
Even in this hybrid environment, we also have kind of this multi-generational workforce, right? Where you have people in their 60s and people in their 20s, and kind of the way that they relate and the attributes and things that are important kind of span. And so I was just thinking about engagement and thinking about setting up some mentoring, right? That gets back to what employees want, both to be mentors and to be menteed, right? To have someone know that their career is being helped and assisted and guided by somebody who's been there and done that. And then thinking also about putting together kind of cross-functional teams. There are a lot of big challenges that organizations are trying to solve and overcome. And so they're the organizations that are going to leverage the creativity and capabilities and different ways of thinkings of these generations and different kind of functional areas. Those organizations that are not afraid to kind of put together these cross-functional teams to get everyone's expertise to allow people to really problem solve creatively, I think they're going to become, they're going to really have a leg up.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we have to kind of wind things up pretty soon, but I wanted to talk about resilience and capacity building when it comes to growth. Could each of you kind of comment on that? About building capacity within the organization, and then what does it mean to be resilient, and why is that so important right now for companies coming out of COVID and hopefully getting back into some normalcy?
Well, I would tie resilience to the growth imperative. We're here to talk about growth. Resilience is a huge part of that. And companies really need to bake in this. Resilience is about being able to face challenges head on. And it's also about being able to bounce back from difficult situations. And the way that we bake that in, or the way that we build that in our companies, has a lot to do with how much we can grow and how well we are poised to grow further. We're out of the acute phase of the pandemic, but I think that there's still a little bit of volatility out there. So, having a resilience agenda means looking at a lot of different aspects of the company: financial resilience, operational resilience. I tend to, because of my background and my focus, I focus on leadership resilience. And how do we do that? How do we really build a workforce and build a culture that's resilient? Some of it has to do with helping people develop more stress tolerance. A lot of it has to do with helping our systems, our process, our people, our culture just be more adaptable and more agile, be able to change.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anne, how would you comment?
Yeah, I think, Margaret really can speak very well to the resilience of individuals and leaders. And I think it certainly starts there. I think of capacity as kind of organizational resilience, right? What kind of systems and processes do you have in place to support the work and the team? What are you building in your leadership team that allows people to be comfortable with change and understand change? And to kind of dig deep when they need to. And then finally, kind of what's your balance sheet look like? How are you making money? How are you managing expenses? What do you have to invest for that financial resilience piece? That's all part of capacity.
That's great. I mean, we just scratched the surface on all this stuff. Gosh, I could talk the rest of the afternoon about it, but we're about out of time. I do want to thank both of you for being here today and sharing your expertise and experience around growth. I really enjoyed the conversation. If the audience wants to get more information about Quinn Strategy Group and Tandem Partners, where should they go?
So my website is quinnstrategygroup.com, and you can look at that, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Ann Quinn.
And Tandem Partners, you will find at tandem-partners.com or find us on LinkedIn. Thanks for having us, John.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being here today. Really enjoyed the conversation. This has been the Growth in Business podcast for Citybiz, and I'm John Dinkel, and enjoy the rest of your day.